A John Doe found in 1974 was identified nearly 50 years later, thanks in large part to the never-ending efforts of volunteer genealogists who solved the case. On February 11, 1974, hikers found the remains of an unidentified male near rocks at the bottom of a steep slope above Geneva Road, a short distance from U.S. Highway 285 near Grant, Colorado. When the Park County Police hiked to the scene, they discovered the remains were already decomposing, and the man was not carrying any identification. The man was wearing blue jeans, a long-sleeve shirt, long johns, and boots. The forensic investigators determined he was between 30 and 60 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed about 160 pounds. The man had died about 4 months before being discovered sometime in the fall or early winter of 1973. The person showed multiple blunt force injuries and suffered multiple broken bones believed to result from a fall or intentional jump from a high place. With no identification or vehicle present, the person remained a John Doe. He became known as Park County John Doe. The case went cold after a month, and the man was buried in an unmarked grave in Fairplay Cemetery. The case was reopened after Park County Coroner David E. Kint Jr. took office in 2011. In 2017, more than 4 decades later, the remains were dug up to obtain DNA. At first, standard methods gave no leads, and the all-volunteer organization DNA Doe Project was brought in to help in 2019. From there, the case took off. DNA was processed through Astrea Forensics for extraction, Hudson Alpha Discovery for whole genome sequencing, and Sabre Investigations for profile development. The DNA profile was uploaded to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. After nearly 800 hours of volunteer genealogy research, the team built extensive family trees, overcoming record scarcity, especially of Eastern European Jewish heritage. Ultimately, a first-cousin match confirmed the identity. The man was finally identified in 2020, nearly 47 years after he was found, as Anthony John Armbrust III. Anthony was born in 1929 in Ohio and spent most of his youth there before moving to San Diego, California. The Park County Coroner's Office said that Anthony was 44 at the time of his death. He was an aeronautical engineer and leader of a metaphysical church in San Diego. He moved to Golden, Colorado with his second wife, Renee, shortly before his death. The last the couple was heard from was in 1973 when they sent a letter to members of his church asking if they could come and get their German Shepherd puppy and belongings. Members of the church did as they were asked. They came to Golden immediately. They found the apartment empty. They took the few remaining items and the German Shepherd puppy who was in good health. That was the last time anyone heard from the Armbrusts. The couple was never reported missing. They had a daughter who lives in Arizona. The Park County coroner said that she had been notified of her father's identification. The investigators believe that Anthony suffering from a terminal illness and Renee traveled to the Colorado mountains with the plan to end their lives together. Despite searches, Renee has never been found and is thought to have lost her life in the same pact. Following his identification, the authorities and developers of the case emphasized the importance of giving Anthony his name and story, ensuring he was no longer an unknown marker in a cemetery. The remains of a woman found in Georgia almost 40 years ago have finally been identified, and the investigators said that they suspect she was the victim of one of the nation's most prolific serial killers. On September 28, 1981, unidentified remains of an African-American woman were found alongside Interstate 24 in Dade County, Georgia, near the Tennessee border. She was estimated to be in her late 20s or early 30s. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation kept the case open, but with limited leads and no identification, it gradually went cold. In 2018, almost 4 decades later, the notorious serial killer Samuel Little, already serving life sentences, confessed to ending the life of a young black woman in Chattanooga in the early 1980s. His detailed memories included the location and circumstances of the crime. Hamilton County, Tennessee officials could not find matching unsolved cases, so they worked together with the GBI in Georgia. The description lined up with the 1981 remains. GBI investigators flew to Texas in December 2018 to interview Little, who reinforced their belief that the remains were indeed of the woman he ended the life of after meeting her in Chattanooga. On March 19, 2019, the Hamilton County Cold Case Unit held a press briefing, revealing a clay reconstruction of the victim's face and asking for public help. A family member recognized the reconstruction and contacted the authorities. DNA samples confirmed in October 2020 that the victim was 30-year-old Patricia Parker, a woman from Chattanooga. According to the FBI, Little has confessed to ending the lives of 5 women in the Georgia area, including Patricia Parker, and he has confessed to strangling 93 victims between 1970 and 2005. Little targeted women from vulnerable groups, including women who were involved in prostitution or suffering from drug addiction. He is currently serving 3 life sentences in California. Patricia's family has been looking for her for 30-plus years. Her son took comfort knowing that his mom did not just leave him. 2 Oregon cases decades apart has been linked to the same killer. July 1, 1999 was the last day that 42-year-old Mark Jeffrey Dribin, who worked as a cargo worker for United Airlines in Portland, Oregon, was seen alive. On July 6, he was officially reported missing. Mark was the kind of man who lived a quiet life. His friends knew him as reliable and steady, a man who showed up for his shifts and never missed a beat. That is why it was so unlike him that he never clocked in for work on the 1st of July and he never came home. Days later, on July 18th, his car was found abandoned in southeast Portland. Inside his home, the investigators found no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints, nothing except an unknown DNA profile. They knew something terrible had happened, but with no suspect and no body, the case was reaching a standstill. By August 2000, the following year, the state declared Mark dead, and the case went cold. His family had no answers, no justice, just a lingering fear that the person who ended his life was still out there. In March 2019, almost 2 decades later, Portland's cold case unit looked at Mark's case again. They sent the old DNA sample that was collected in 1999 to be analyzed using forensic genealogy. In September 2019, the investigation identified Christopher Charles Lovrian as a potential suspect through genealogy. They interviewed him in November asking him about Mark's disappearance. Lovrian denied everything, but the investigators were patient. They just needed his DNA. Lovrian, a then regularly unemployed Portland man, had a minor criminal history. As the detectives were busy investigating, another man, 56-year-old Kenneth Griffin from Portland, also disappeared without a trace in February 2020. Like Mark, Kenneth was well-liked, dependable. When he did not show up, people noticed. His loved ones reported him missing on February 2nd, and the detectives opened yet another missing person file. On April 16, 2020, the detectives finally got a court order to obtain Lovrian's DNA. It matched the 1999 crime scene. On April 30th, a grand jury charged Lovrian for Mark's murder. Just 4 days later, the U.S. Marshals arrested him. The police searched his southeast Portland home on May 6th. They expected to find evidence related to Mark's case. Instead, they uncovered a horror. Inside a shed on Lovrian's property, they found dismembered human remains stuffed in containers. The remains belonged to Kenneth Griffin, the man who vanished only months earlier. The investigators also suspect there may be other victims based on items recovered from Lovrian's property. In court, the prosecutors described Lovrian as a predator, someone who lured men into his home and then took their lives. The full motive remains unclear. Whether it was for control, thrill, or something darker, only Lovrian knows. On January 12, 2024, Lovrian pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter in Mark's case, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In April 2024, he was convicted of second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse in Kenneth's case. He was sentenced to life to run one after the other with the manslaughter sentence, meaning he must serve 46 years before parole eligibility. Greenville, South Carolina man was finally sentenced in a 2015 cold case in the neighborhood of Michael Drive in Greenville, South Carolina. The evening of October 15, 2015 turned into a scene of chaos. Firefighters rushed to a home covered in flames. When the smoke cleared, the investigators discovered something far more sinister than an accidental fire. A badly decomposed body wrapped in a tarp and blankets hidden in the basement. That body belonged to Cecil Sandy Morris, a 58-year-old man known for his easygoing nature. At first glance, the authorities suspected foul play. An autopsy confirmed their fears. Sandy had been shot twice in the back of the neck before the fire was set. The fire was not an accident. It was a cover-up. The detectives immediately began searching for leads. Sandy's home showed signs of an attempt to destroy evidence and his vehicle was missing. His neighbors reported seeing a man coming and going from the house, but the tips soon dried up. Despite early efforts, the case went cold for years with no arrests and no clear suspect. By 2016, the following year, the file was collecting dust. Sandy's family was left heartbroken with no answers and no justice. 5 years after the case was opened in 2020, the Greenville County Sheriff's Office launched a new cold case unit dedicated to looking again at unsolved cases. Sandy's case was one of the first on their list. The detectives dug into old evidence, hoping modern forensic technology and renewed investigation could give results. It worked. A fresh review of surveillance footage from the time of the fire showed something crucial. Jason Travis Merrill, a man with a criminal record and Sandy's former roommate, was driving Sandy's vehicle in the days following the incident. Merrill's DNA was also found inside a glove recovered at the scene, which also had the victim's biological material on it. Further investigation revealed more damning evidence. Merrill had visited the crime scene after the fire. The victim's car was later found hidden at a relative's home in Brevard, North Carolina. The detectives pieced together the timeline. Merrill and Sandy had a dispute while living together. At some point between October 11th and October 15th, Merrill shot Sandy twice in the neck, wrapped his body in a tarp, and left it in the basement. To destroy evidence, he set the house on fire and ran away in Sandy's car. It was reported that Merrill had flown to California between October 18th and October 28th. He was seen on surveillance videos returning to Michael Drive on October 30th, driving the victim's vehicle and leaving several hours later. Deputies believed that Merrill then went to a relative's home in Brevard, North Carolina, the same home where he would be taken into custody on November 20th, 2020. He was sent back to South Carolina and charged with second-degree murder and arson. Sandy's vehicle was also recovered at the Brevard residence, and forensic analysis linked Merrill to items at the crime scene. The case finally reached its end on November 5, 2024, when Merrill pleaded guilty in court. The judge sentenced the 48-year-old man to 35 years in prison, bringing long-awaited justice to Sandy's family. The officials said that he will serve his sentence in the South Carolina Department of Corrections facility. For Sandy's loved ones, it was bittersweet closure after nearly a decade of unanswered questions. One family member said with tears streaming down their face, "We finally have justice. Sandy can rest now." Dentures found at the scene of a sexual assault led the detectives to the man responsible for ending the lives of 2 women who were found in Fraser, Tennessee. On October 22, 2001, 2 teens had been out hunting when they made a gruesome discovery. The body of 46-year-old Nancy Carol Alvis was found in a weed-filled area off Old Millington Road in the Fraser neighborhood of Memphis, Tennessee. Her decomposed body was identified by her dental records. According to the medical examiner, she had been strangled weeks earlier. While the sheriff's investigators were busy doing the follow-up work the next day, they discovered a second body, the body of 37-year-old Patricia Thornton. The medical examiners determined that she had been stabbed and that she had been dead for about 2 days. Both victims were found naked except for wearing shoes. Both women were known to go to Harpo's Bar on Highway 51, a gathering spot where Patricia was especially known and the last known location they were seen alive. In the years that followed, the investigators considered the possibility that these 2 cases were linked to a serial killer, particularly Samuel Little, who confessed to ending the lives of over 90 women by strangulation. However, no direct evidence ever linked him to these cases. Another possible suspect at the time was Thomas Maupin, but he was not charged. He admitted to often taking women to the end of Old Millington Road to have sex for money. Maupin said that he knew both women as frequent customers of Harpo's Bar. Despite all efforts, the case went cold. In a separate sexual assault case in August 2001, just a few weeks before Nancy and Patricia's bodies were found in North Memphis, the police were called to the 1200 block of Thomas Street. A woman said that she was approached by a man. He parked his car and started walking with her. Moments later, he forced her into an alley, stabbed her with a metal object that pierced through her chin into the roof of her mouth. He then used that object to sexually assault her and forced her to perform acts. She survived the brutal attack and agreed to a sexual assault examination. The detectives found dentures at the crime scene with a man's name on them. They were bagged and along with the assault kit placed in a Memphis Police Department property room where they sat for years. In 2013, more than a decade later, a citywide initiative in Memphis to clear the backlog of untested kits began. In 2016, this case's dentures and assault kit were finally sent to a state lab for testing. Not only was DNA found, but the investigators also learned that those dentures were made for a man while he was in prison in 1988, serving a 12-year sentence for taking the life of a 6-year-old girl, Tricia Noli, in Washington state. The dentures belonged to Thomas Maupin, one of the previous suspects in the case. He pleaded guilty to the assault of the woman a year later and started serving an 8-year sentence at Trousdale Turner Correctional Center in Hartsville, about 50 miles northeast of Nashville. Maupin went to Memphis after he served the 12-year sentence. He was twice convicted and sentenced to 40 years, but the convictions were overturned on appeal, and he was released in 1997 after pleading guilty to a lesser charge. The solving of the cold case assault from August 2001 led to a reopening of the unsolved October 2001 case of Nancy and Patricia. The sheriff's office was finally able to pin Maupin to the case. On June 10, 2020, he was charged on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Helen Tuttle, Nancy's sister, said, "I went out to the cemetery to let her know. She knows that I fought long enough, long and hard, and I would never give up. It has been years of uncertainty." And finally, justice is in reach. Marcine Gibson, Patricia's aunt, said, "I believe God will make sure he gets what he deserves." The 2 women are remembered as loving and selfless. They were both mothers. Helen said she loved her kids more than anything in the world. He walked free all of those years. In 2021, 20 years after the crime took place, the families of the 2 victims got to face the man responsible for their brutal end. Then 71-year-old Maupin admitted to ending the lives of Patricia and Nancy. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. Prosecuting attorney Eric Christensen said, "We had to make a reduction because a number of key witnesses had passed away during the last 20 years. Our primary goal was accountability. We wanted him to admit to what he did." Maupin, who entered court in a wheelchair, will get 12 years behind bars, which will start after 2 more years served for the 2001 assault case. He will be eligible for parole after serving 30% of the 12 years. The district attorney's office said that they will fight to make sure he does not get out. Lisa Guthrie, Patricia's sister, said, "I just hope he feels some kind of remorse. From the look on his face, it looks like he did not have remorse. People like that do not even have a soul." A man was stabbed to his death in 1985 in Oklahoma. It took more than 3 decades for the investigators to finally make progress in the case with the help of cigarette butts and fingerprints. In September 1985, Oklahoma City florist Paul Douglas Aikman lost his life violently in a lonely spot along the Turner Turnpike at a rest stop that no longer exists. He was only 35 years old. The medical examiners concluded that he was fatally stabbed. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agents found only a few clues at the crime scene: prints on the passenger door handle of the victim's red Pontiac and cigarette butts inside. This evidence allowed the investigators to develop a DNA profile of a suspect, but no matches were found at the time, and the case eventually went cold. More than 3 decades after the crime in 2019, the agents got a break when a suspect was identified from the DNA found on one of the butts. The DNA hit came from a search of CODIS. The DNA matched to then 55-year-old Earl Wilson. Criminalists then matched the fingerprint impression taken from the crime scene to Wilson. He was locked up in an Oklahoma prison for unrelated crimes. Attorney General Hunter said, "Advances in DNA technology are allowing authorities to take another look at these difficult cases. Just because cases go cold does not mean someone should not be held responsible, even after 3 decades." In June 2020, first-degree murder charges have been filed against him. Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation's Director Ricky Adams said, "For 35 years, Paul Aikman's family has ached, not knowing who was responsible for his death. 35 years have passed, but we have not forgotten about Paul. Thanks to science and determined police work by our agents and our cold case unit, we are pleased to announce that the suspect in Paul's case has been identified. In October 2021, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison."